In a small pizza shop on the edge of the city, where dreams often take a backseat to survival, a simple act of kindness is about to change two lives forever. For Alex, a pizza delivery driver who can barely keep his lights on, compassion isn't something that waits for a better paycheck. When he spots a weary traveler sitting alone outside his shop one cold evening, he doesn't see someone who could afford the entire restaurant. He just sees someone in need of a warm meal. What he doesn't know is that the quiet woman in the simple clothes isn't just another tired tourist. She's Elena Thompson, CEO of a billion-dollar tech empire, who left her boardroom behind searching for something money can't buy. As the aroma of fresh pizza brings a smile to her face, neither realizes this chance encounter will spark a story that proves sometimes the richest moments in life come from the simplest acts of kindness. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun hadn't yet touched the city streets when Alex Martinez pulled into the cramped parking lot behind Tony's Pizza. His beaten-up Honda Civic, sporting more rust than paint, settled into its usual spot with a familiar wheeze. The dashboard clock blinked 5:47 a.m., another early start to another long day. Inside the kitchen, the air already carried the rich scent of rising dough. Old Tony, who'd owned the place for 30 years, believed in doing everything from scratch. No shortcuts to real flavor, he'd always say, his Italian accent thick despite decades in the States. Alex tied his apron with practiced moves, his fingers tracing over the worn fabric that had seen better days, just like everything else in his life. The morning prep routine was sacred, a dance he knew by heart. Chopping fresh vegetables, grating wheels of cheese, stirring the secret recipe marinara that Tony guarded like a family heirloom. Each motion carried purpose, each ingredient handled with care, despite the constant pressure of the ticking clock. Between prep tasks, Alex checked his phone. 3 missed calls from the hospital's billing department. His mother's latest round of chemotherapy had drained what little savings he'd managed to scrape together. The payment plan he'd negotiated was already stretched thin, and now they were talking about additional treatments. He tucked the phone away, pushing down the familiar knot of anxiety. Later, he'd figure it out later. By noon, the lunch rush hit like a tidal wave. Alex moved between deliveries and kitchen help, each hour bringing new challenges. A dropped pizza meant redoing an order. A flat tire meant repairs he couldn't afford. Every tip counted, carefully tucked away in an envelope marked "Mom's Medicine." The regulars knew him by name. The office workers who ordered every Wednesday, the teachers from the elementary school 3 blocks over, the elderly couple on Pine Street who always asked him to change their porch light because their arthritis made it difficult. These small connections, these moments of community, made the job more than just a paycheck. In quiet moments between deliveries, Alex would retreat to the small office in the back, poring over restaurant management books borrowed from the library. Spreadsheets of costs, business plans sketched on napkins, dreams laid out in careful calculations. His own place someday, Martinez's, written in bright neon, tables filled with families, laughter echoing off the walls. The dream felt impossible most days, but he held onto it like a lifeline. Tony caught him studying once again during the afternoon lull. The old man's eyes crinkled with understanding. "You remind me of myself 40 years ago," he said, settling into the creaky office chair. Same fire in the belly. He shared stories of his own beginning, of sleeping on flour sacks and living on coffee and determination. Alex soaked up every word, adding notes to his already full notebook. As evening approached, the dinner rush brought its own rhythm. Each delivery was a new story. Birthday parties, family gatherings, lonely souls seeking comfort in familiar flavors. Alex carried more than just pizzas. He carried moments of joy, relief from hunger, the simple pleasure of a hot meal at the end of a long day. The night's tips weren't great, but they were enough to cover half of what the hospital wanted. Maybe he could pick up some extra shifts at his friend's car wash on Sunday. His mother would object, worried about him working himself too hard. But her smile when he visited the hospital made every exhausting hour worth it. Just before closing, Alex counted the day's earnings, adding them to his carefully maintained ledger. The numbers told a story of survival, of dreams deferred but not abandoned. Outside, the city lights twinkled like distant stars, each one representing another soul, making their way through their own struggles, their own hopes, their own impossible dreams. 30 stories above Manhattan, Elena Thompson stood at her office window, watching the city pulse with artificial life. Her reflection in the glass barely resembled the Forbes cover from last month. Tech's rising queen. How Elena Thompson revolutionized digital security. The sleek designer suit and perfectly styled hair couldn't hide the exhaustion in her eyes. The board meeting that morning had been particularly brutal. TechGuard, her company, faced pressure from investors pushing for a merger with their biggest competitor. It's just business, they said, but Elena knew better. The merger would mean layoffs for thousands of employees who had been with her since the beginning, when TechGuard was just 5 people working out of a garage in Seattle. Ms. Thompson, her assistant, James, appeared at the door. The merger team sent over the latest projections. They need your decision by Monday. Another stack of papers joined the fortress of documents on her desk. James hesitated, then added, "And your mother's foundation called. They're expecting you at the charity gala tonight." Elena's hand instinctively went to her mother's ring, worn on a chain around her neck. Sarah Thompson had built their family's first tech company from nothing, only to lose it all in a hostile takeover. "Never let them see your heart," she'd warned Elena. "In this world, kindness is seen as weakness." 3 years after her death, Elena still struggled with that advice. The gala invitation felt like the final straw. Another night of fake smiles, of sharks in expensive suits circling for weakness, of being the perfect CEO they all expected. Elena made a decision that would shock the business world. She simply walked away. In her private bathroom, she traded her power suit for jeans and a simple sweater from her gym bag. The designer heels gave way to comfortable walking shoes. A quick shake of her hair, removal of makeup, and the transformation was complete. In the mirror, she saw a stranger. Exactly what she needed. Her personal phone she left on the desk, keeping only a burner phone for emergencies. James would handle things. He always did. The note she left was simple. "Taking a week. Hold the fort. Trust me." He'd understand, even if no one else would. Instead of her usual car service, Elena took the subway, losing herself in the anonymous crowd. The city felt different at ground level, more real, more alive. She wandered without purpose, breathing, in the unfamiliar freedom of being unremarkable. Hours passed as she explored neighborhoods she'd only seen from car windows. Her feet ached, her stomach growled, but she felt more alive than she had in years. As evening fell, she found herself in a modest area far from her usual haunts. The smell of fresh pizza drew her to a small shop, its neon sign flickering against the darkening sky. Settling on a bench outside, Elena watched people passing by, a young mother juggling groceries and a toddler, an elderly man walking his dog, a group of students laughing over shared jokes. Real people living real lives, untouched by the corporate games she'd left behind. Her thoughts drifted to the merger documents waiting on her desk. The numbers made sense, but numbers couldn't measure the cost in human terms. Her mother had taught her that business was about more than profit margins. But somewhere along the way, that lesson had gotten buried under quarterly reports and shareholder expectations. The pizza shop's door chimed as customers came and went. Through the window, she caught glimpses of the staff working with an easy familiarity, so different from the rigid hierarchy of her corporate world. They reminded her of the early days of TechGuard, when every employee knew each other's names, when success was measured in problems solved rather than stock prices. A chill wind reminded her how long she'd been sitting there. She should find a hotel, start planning her next move. But something about this place, this moment, held her still. In the window's reflection, she barely recognized herself, and for the first time in years, that felt like a blessing rather than a curse. The smell of fresh pizza grew stronger as the door opened again. Elena didn't look up, lost in thoughts. Of boardrooms and betrayals, of paths not taken and choices yet to make. She didn't notice the delivery driver watching her with concern. Didn't realize that her escape from one world was about to lead her straight into another. One where balance sheets and board meetings held no power, where the simple act of sharing a meal could mean more than all the corporate mergers in the world. Alex watched the woman through the shop window between deliveries. She'd been sitting there for over an hour, her shoulders hunched against the evening chill. Something about her stillness tugged at him. It wasn't the stillness of peace, but of someone carrying an invisible weight. The kitchen timer chimed, and he pulled a fresh margarita pizza from the oven. It was supposed to be his dinner, saved for his break between evening deliveries. He hesitated for just a moment before making his decision. "Taking my break, Tony," he called out, grabbing a couple of paper plates and napkins. The bell chimed. As he pushed through the door with the pizza box, "Mind if I join you?" Alex's voice was gentle, not wanting to startle her. Elena looked up, surprised by the kindness in his eyes. "You look like you could use something warm." She started to decline, to explain she wasn't looking for charity, but her protest was interrupted by the unmistakable sound of her stomach growling. A small laugh escaped her, the first genuine one in weeks. "I guess my stomach's doing the talking for me," she said, making room on the bench. The simple act of sliding over, of sharing space with a stranger, felt foreign after years of carefully maintained distance. Alex opened the box, releasing a cloud of fragrant steam into the cool air. "Tony's special recipe," he explained carefully, transferring a slice to a paper plate. "The secret's in the basil. He grows it himself on the roof." Elena took a bite and closed her eyes involuntarily. The flavors were perfect. Nothing like the upscale Italian restaurants she frequented for business dinners. This was honest food, made with care rather than pretense. "This is amazing," she said, meaning it. "I'm Elena," she offered her first. Name only, grateful when he didn't press for more. "Alex." He took a bite of his own slice, and they sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "Rough day?" he finally asked, his tone suggesting genuine interest rather than mere politeness. Elena considered her answer carefully. "Ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" The words slipped out before she could stop them, more honest than she'd intended. Alex nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Sometimes between deliveries I sneak looks at business books. Dream about running my own place someday." He gestured at his worn uniform. "Probably seems pretty small compared to your troubles." "No," Elena said quickly, surprising herself with her vehemence. "Dreams aren't small. Sometimes I think we lose sight of what matters when we chase the wrong ones." Their conversation flowed easily after that, carefully skirting the specifics of their lives while sharing the kinds of truths strangers sometimes can. Alex told her about the garden on the roof, about Tony's theories on the perfect dough consistency. Elena shared stories of her own first job as a waitress, carefully editing out that it had been in her mother's first company's cafeteria. When the pizza was finished, neither seemed ready for the moment to end. But Alex's phone buzzed. Another. Delivery, waiting. "Will you be okay?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. Elena smiled, feeling lighter than she had in months. "Yes, I think I will be. Thank you, Alex. Not just for the pizza." As he gathered the empty box and plates, Alex hesitated. "We're here every day, if you ever want another slice." The offer was simple, genuine. Everything her world wasn't. Elena watched him disappear back into the warmth of the shop, her mind already made up, though she wouldn't admit it yet. She would come back tomorrow and the day after that, not for the pizza, though it was excellent, but for the taste of something she'd been hungrier for than food: authenticity. The next afternoon, just as the lunch rush was winding down, Elena walked into Tony's Pizza. The small bell above the door announced her arrival, and Alex looked up from where he was kneading dough, a light dusting of flour on his cheeks. For a moment he thought he'd imagined her return. "I was hoping to learn something," Elena said, approaching the counter, "about making pizza, if that's allowed." She'd spent the morning in her hotel room, fielding a single cryptic text from James: "Taking care of things. Take your time." Now here she was, drawn back to this simple place like a compass finding north. Tony emerged from the back, wiping his hands on his apron. His shrewd eyes took in Elena's expensive watch, the one thing she'd forgotten to remove in her transformation. But instead of commenting, he simply smiled. "Any friend of Alex's who wants to learn the art is welcome. But no shortcuts. I'll be careful with your secrets," Elena promised, accepting the spare apron Alex handed her. Their fingers brushed briefly, and she noticed how warm his hands were from working the dough. For the next hour, Alex guided her through the basics. "The dough is everything," he explained, showing her how to feel for the right consistency. "It's like getting to know someone. You have to be patient, pay attention to the small things." Elena's first attempt at stretching the dough resulted in a hole, making her laugh at her own clumsiness. "I'm usually better at handling delicate operations," she said, thinking of the million-dollar contracts she navigated daily. "Here," Alex said, standing behind her, "it's all in the motion." His hands guided hers, showing her how to rotate and stretch the dough evenly. Elena found herself holding her breath, acutely aware of his presence, of the simple intimacy of the moment. As they worked, Elena asked questions about the business, her corporate mind unable to entirely shut off. But instead of profit margins and market expansion, she found herself fascinated by the human side. How Alex remembered regular customers' orders, how Tony adjusted prices for elderly customers on fixed incomes, how the restaurant was woven into the fabric of the community. "You're a natural," Alex commented, as she successfully tossed her first proper crust. Their eyes met over the counter, and something unspoken passed between them. For a moment, Elena felt an overwhelming urge to tell him everything about TechGuard, about the merger, about who she really was. But then Tony called Alex for a delivery, breaking the spell. As he grabbed his keys, Alex hesitated. "Will you be here when I get back?" Elena looked at her flour-covered hands, at the simple work she'd accomplished. In her other life, she had meetings scheduled every 15 minutes, decisions affecting thousands of lives. Here, success was measured in perfectly stretched dough and properly placed toppings. "I'd like to be," she said softly, "if that's okay." "More than okay," Alex replied, a warm smile lighting up his face. "Maybe you can help me close up later. I could show you how to make Tony's special marinara." As Elena watched him leave, guilt gnawed at her conscience. Every moment she spent here deepened the deception. But for the first time in years, she felt real, felt present in her own life. How could something built on a lie feel so authentically right? Tony's voice interrupted her thoughts. "The sauce won't make itself, Piccola." He gestured to the kitchen with a knowing look. "And maybe while we cook, you can tell old Tony what brings a woman like you to hide in a simple pizza shop." Elena froze, but Tony's eyes held no judgment, only understanding. Perhaps, she thought, there was room for truth between the lies after all. Over the next week, Elena's presence became as much a part of Tony's Pizza as the ancient cash register that occasionally stuck on fives. She'd arrive in the afternoon, don her now personal apron hanging on the designated hook, and slip into the rhythm of the kitchen as if she'd always been there. The regulars started to notice changes in Alex. His perpetual worry lines eased, his smile came more readily, and there was a new spring in his step when he made deliveries. Even his tips improved. Happiness, it seemed, was good for business. "You're humming," Marco, the evening shift cook, pointed out one busy Thursday. "You never hum." Alex hadn't even noticed, but he was. An old Italian song Tony had taught Elena earlier that day. The reality of his life, however, hadn't changed. That morning, he'd spent 2 hours at the hospital with his mother, watching her endure another round of chemotherapy. The new treatment was more aggressive, and so were the bills. The folder from the hospital financial office grew thicker, and his mother's face grew thinner. "You should tell her," his mother had said weakly, noticing how he checked his phone for messages. "This Elena girl you keep mentioning. About us, about all of this." But Alex would just shake his head, adjusting her blankets instead of responding. How could he tell Elena about any of it? About the second job he'd taken at his friend's car wash, about the nights he spent poring over medical bills and loan applications, about the dream of his own restaurant that seemed to drift further away with each passing day. She was like a bright spot of sunshine in his life. He couldn't bear to watch that light dim with pity. Back at the pizza shop, Elena was becoming surprisingly proficient. She had a knack for remembering orders and an eye for detail that impressed even Tony. But it was her way with customers that truly stood out. She spoke to everyone like they mattered, whether they were ordering a single slice or catering for "50. Your girlfriend's got class," Mrs. Rossetti, their elderly Thursday regular, commented to Alex while Elena was in the back. Not the stuck-up kind, real class. Alex started to explain that Elena wasn't his girlfriend, but Mrs. Rossetti just winked and took her usual order of mushroom and olive. The days fell into a comfortable pattern. Elena would help with prep work, learning Tony's recipes with remarkable precision. During slow periods, she and Alex would talk about everything and nothing. Favorite books, childhood memories, dreams for the future. He told her about the restaurant he wanted to open someday, showing her his carefully drawn plans on the back of order tickets. But there were moments when Alex caught something in her eyes, a shadow of worry, a flash of guilt. Sometimes she'd step outside to take phone calls, returning with tension in her shoulders. He never pressed her about it. Just like she never asked about the hospital bills he quickly tucked away when she approached his prep station. One evening, while closing up, Alex found a sequence of numbers Eleanor had absently scrawled on an order pad, calculations involving millions. When he asked about it, she quickly crumpled the paper, laughing it off as nonsense doodles. The moment hung between them, heavy with unasked questions. The wall of silence between their real lives grew higher with each passing day, built from good intentions and fear. Alex knew he was falling for someone he didn't fully know, and the thought terrified him. His life was complicated enough without adding another layer of uncertainty, yet every morning his first thought was of her. Would she come in today? Would this be the day she didn't return? Each time the door chimed, his heart would leap, then settle into a warm contentment when he saw her familiar smile. Tony watched it all with knowing eyes, occasionally muttering in Italian about young people making simple things complicated. But even he couldn't deny that his pizza shop had come alive in a new way. The place hummed with an energy that had nothing to do with the old fluorescent lights and everything to do with the spark between his young delivery driver and the mysterious woman who was clearly more than she appeared to be. In her hotel room each night, Elena lived a double life. Her laptop would glow with urgent emails from James, each one carrying news of the mounting crisis at TechGuard. The merger vultures were circling closer, sensing her absence as weakness. Board members were getting restless, and competitors were starting to whisper about a possible hostile takeover. "The board's patience isn't infinite," James wrote in his latest update. "Richards is rallying support for an emergency vote. We need you, Elena." She closed the laptop, moving to the window of her modest hotel room, so different from her usual penthouse suites. Below, the city continued its eternal dance of lights and shadows. Somewhere out there was her old life, with its power suits and boardroom battles. Yet here she was, hands still smelling of pizza dough and basil, thinking about her delivery drivers, Smile. Her burner phone chimed with a text from Alex. You left your apron inside out on the hook. Tony says it's bad luck. See you tomorrow? Such a simple message, but it made her smile more than any million-dollar contract ever had. During her morning routine, Elena found herself adopting habits from the pizza shop. She'd catch herself testing the bathroom tap's water temperature the way Alex had taught her to test dough water. Her expensive shampoo sat unused, replaced by simple soap that wouldn't leave lingering scents in food prep areas. The hotel staff had begun to recognize her. No longer the typical business traveler in pressed suits. Now she was the quiet woman in jeans who smelled of freshly baked bread and marinara. The transformation went deeper than clothes. She stood differently, smiled more easily, laughed without restraint. But reality had a way of intruding. During a quiet moment at the pizza shop, her burner phone had displayed a news alert. Tech guard stock plummets amid leadership concerns. The photo accompanying the article showed her corporate headshot, looking every inch the powerful CEO she was supposed to be. Alex had been wiping down nearby tables. She'd barely managed to hide the screen in time. You okay? He'd asked, noticing her tension. You look like you've seen a ghost. In a way she had. That woman in the photo felt like a stranger now. Polished, perfect, and utterly alone. The Elena who spent her days learning to make pizza, who laughed at Alex's terrible puns, who sat with Tony during breaks and listened to stories of the old country. She felt real in a way the CEO never. Had James called during her evening walks back to the hotel, his voice increasingly strained. The Jensen contract is wobbling. They want reassurance from you personally. I've delayed as much as I can, but... He paused, unusual for her typically efficient assistant. Elena, are you finding what you're looking for? She thought about Alex's passionate descriptions of the restaurant he dreamed of opening, the way his eyes lit up when sharing his plans. How different from the corporate dreams she'd been chasing, dreams inherited from her mother, shaped by expectations rather than passion. In the drawer of her hotel room, Elena kept her corporate credit cards and ID untouched since her first day of escape. Next to them lay a simple string of receipt paper where Alex had written out Tony's secret dough recipe for her to practice. The contrast between these two pieces of her life felt stark, impossible to reconcile. One afternoon, Tony had caught her staring at her reflection in the steel prep table. You know, he'd said quietly, the truth has a way of rising, like good dough. The longer you try to press it down, he'd left the thought unfinished. But his meaning was clear, Elena's. Fingers traced over Alex's handwritten recipe. Every innocent question he asked about her past felt like a small betrayal. Every genuine moment they shared made the eventual revelation of her true identity more dangerous. She was falling for him, not just him, but this entire world he'd welcomed her into. The thought of losing it all made her chest tight with panic. Her corporate phone, hidden in her laptop bag, held over 100 urgent messages now. Each one represented a responsibility she'd walked away from, people depending on her leadership. The weight of those obligations pressed against the simple joy she'd found in the pizza shop. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent years building walls to protect herself in the corporate world, only to find that her greatest vulnerability came from trying to live without them. Every smile Alex gave her, every lesson Tony shared, every moment of belonging in that simple pizza shop, they were all built on a foundation that couldn't last. Yet each morning, she found herself walking back to Tony's Pizza, drawn by something stronger than guilt or fear. In the end, Elena realized she wasn't just hiding from her corporate life. She was searching for something she'd never known. She needed. The question was, when the truth finally rose to the surface, would anything remain but broken trust and lost possibilities? The envelope from the hospital seemed heavier than paper should be. Alex sat in his car outside Tony's Pizza, the early morning darkness matching his mood as he read the notice again. Urgent, Payment required for continued treatment. The number at the bottom made his vision blur. More money than he'd make in 3 months of deliveries. His phone buzzed with a text from the hospital. His mother had been admitted again last night, her fever spiking dangerously high. The new treatment was taking a toll, and the doctors were concerned about complications. He should be there now, but the morning prep wouldn't do itself, and Tony was already short-staffed. The apartment eviction notice sat on his passenger seat, pink and final. 3 months behind now, his landlord's patience had run out. The same landlord whose daughter's wedding he'd catered last summer at cost, whose grandkids got free pizzas when they visited. Business was business, he'd said, not meeting Alex's eyes. Inside the pizza shop, Elena was already there, surprising him. She'd never arrived this early before. She took one look at his face and stopped mid-dough stretch. "Alex, what's wrong?" Everything in him wanted to tell her. About the sleepless nights calculating bills, about watching his mother grow weaker while he grew more desperate, about the dream of his own restaurant feeling like a cruel joke now. Instead, he forced a smile. Just tired. Rough night. But his hands shook as he tried to prep the marinara sauce, spilling some on his already stained uniform. Elena watched him with worried eyes as he struggled to keep up with the morning routine he usually handled with ease. "Let me help," she said softly, reaching for the spilled sauce. Their hands met briefly, and he jerked away as if burned. Her kindness was too much right now. It might break what little composure he had left. The morning crawled by in a fog. Alex kept checking his phone between orders, each message from the hospital making his heart race. His mother's condition wasn't improving. The doctors wanted to try an experimental treatment, expensive but promising. The word experimental echoed in his head like a mockery. During the lunch rush, he messed up 3 orders in a row. Tony pulled him aside, concern evident in his weathered face. "Go to her," the old man said, pressing a small envelope into his hands. "Your mama needs you more than we do right now." The envelope contained cash, more than a week's wages. Alex tried to protest, but Tony cut him off with a wave. "Family first, always. We manage here." Elena had watched the exchange, her expression unreadable. As Alex grabbed his keys, she caught his arm. "Wait," she said, then hesitated, something like internal struggle passing across her face. I might be able to help." For a moment, Alex thought he saw something else in her eyes, knowledge, power, the ability to make his problems disappear. But that was ridiculous. She was just a kind woman who'd wandered into his life, someone who made pizza dough and laughed at his bad jokes. What could she possibly do? "Thanks," he said roughly, "but this is something I need to handle myself." The words came out harsher than he intended, and he saw her flinch slightly. As he drove to the hospital, his mind raced with calculations. He could sell his car, pick up more shifts at the car wash, maybe ask his cousin about that construction job. But deep down, he knew it wouldn't be enough. Nothing would be enough. His mother was awake when he arrived, her smile weak but present. "My busy boy," she whispered, patting his hand, "always working so hard." Her hospital bracelet slid loosely on her too thin wrist. "I'm going to fix this, Mom," he promised, his voice cracking. "Somehow." She looked at him with knowing eyes. "Sometimes," she said softly, "we need to let others help us carry our burdens. Like that girl you tell me about, Elena. She sees something special in you, my son. Don't let pride stand in the way of angels." But Alex just squeezed her hand, watching the IV drip mark time in steady drops, each one feeling like another dollar he didn't have, another promise he couldn't keep. Outside the hospital window, the city continued its relentless pace, indifferent to the quiet desperation playing out in countless rooms like this one. His phone buzzed again. Elena, checking if he was okay. He stared at the message for a long time. Tears finally spilling over. Everything was falling apart, and for the first time in his life, Alex wasn't sure he could find a way to put it back together. The evening quiet settled over Tony's pizza like a familiar blanket. Alex and Elena worked side by side, closing down the shop while Tony had left early for his grandson's basketball game. The routine they'd developed felt like a dance. Her wiping down tables while he counted the register. Him restocking supplies while she organized the prep station for tomorrow. "Tell me more about your restaurant dream," Elena said softly, breaking their comfortable silence. After his mother's hospitalization, she'd noticed how he'd stopped mentioning it entirely. Alex paused, a stack of clean plates in his hands. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he set the plates down and pulled out a worn notebook from his back pocket. "I've never shown anyone all of it," he said, hesitating before holding it out to her. Elena handled the notebook like a precious artifact. Inside, beyond the basic business plans she'd glimpsed before, she found detailed sketches of table layouts, menu ideas, even paint color samples taped to pages. But what caught her eye were the little notes in the margins. Mom's favorite recipe, and like the one from that place we visited before she got sick. It's not just a restaurant, she realized aloud. It's a tribute to her. Alex ran his fingers through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as self-consciousness. "She used to cater from our home kitchen when I was growing up. Nothing fancy, just good food that made people happy. After Dad left, it kept us going. She always said food was love made visible." Elena's throat tightened. In her corporate world, restaurants were investment opportunities, numbers on spreadsheets. This was something else entirely. A son's love, a family's legacy, a dream built from memory and hope. "Show me how it would look," she said, pulling him toward an empty table. Alex hesitated, then began to move salt and pepper shakers, creating a miniature layout of his vision. "The kitchen would be open here," he explained, his voice gaining enthusiasm. "So families can see their food being made. The tables would be round. Mom always said round tables make everyone feel included." His hands moved with growing animation. "And this corner would have a special table reserved for people who can't afford to pay, because everyone deserves a good meal." Elena watched him, her heart aching. In her pocket, her phone vibrated. Probably James with more crisis updates from TechGuard. The merger vultures were circling closer every day. She had the power to make Alex's dream a reality with a single phone call, to solve all his problems with one signature. The words rose to her throat. "I can help. I can fix everything." But before she could speak, Alex's phone rang. His face fell as he checked the number. "The hospital," he said, turning away to answer. Elena watched his shoulders tense as he listened. Her enhanced business instincts, honed through years of corporate negotiations, picked up the subtle signs of bad news, the slight shake in his hand, the way his other fist clenched unconsciously. When he hung up, he didn't turn around immediately. "They want to stop the treatment," he said, his voice hollow. "Insurance won't cover the experimental option. Without it—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Elena stepped toward him, her hand reaching out, but he suddenly turned and grabbed the dish bin, his movements aggressive. "I should finish cleaning up." "Alex, wait." She caught his arm. "Let me—" "Don't." His voice was rough. "Please, I can't take pity right now, not from you." "It's not pity," she whispered. But how could she explain that she had the means to help, that her company's charitable foundation could cover his mother's medical bills 100 times over, that she wasn't just the simple pizza shop worker he'd taken under his wing? The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Alex's eyes met hers, and she saw something there that terrified her. Trust. Pure, complete trust in who he thought she was. "You know what's crazy?" he said, attempting a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sometimes I look at you and I feel like everything's going to be okay. Like you're some kind of guardian angel in an apron." The irony of his words hit her like a physical blow. She was no angel. She was a liar, letting him struggle while she held the power to help, all because she was afraid of losing this simple, beautiful connection they'd built. As they finished closing up in silence, Elena made a decision. Tomorrow she would tell him everything. She would face the disappointment in his eyes, the sense of betrayal. She would risk losing this world she'd grown to love more than her corporate empire. Because sometimes, she realized, love meant choosing truth over comfort, risk over safety. Even if it meant watching a dream shatter, trust was too precious to be built on lies. What she didn't know was that tomorrow would bring its own revelations, ones that neither of them was prepared for. The morning started like any other at Tony's Pizza. The news played quietly on the small TV mounted in the corner, background noise that nobody really watched. Alex moved through his prep routine mechanically, his mind still at the hospital, with his mother. Elena hadn't arrived yet, but her apron hung ready on its hook, waiting. The news anchor's voice suddenly cut through the kitchen's familiar sounds. Breaking news in the business world. TechGuard CEO Elena Thompson's unexpected absence has sparked rumors of a hostile takeover. Sources say the revolutionary tech company's stock has plummeted amid uncertainty. Alex glanced up absently, then froze. There on the screen was a familiar face, one he'd seen every day for the past week, but transformed. Elena, his Elena, dressed in an impeccable business suit, speaking at a corporate podium. The caption beneath read, "Elena Thompson, CEO of TechGuard, file footage." The marinara sauce he'd been stirring began to bubble over, but he couldn't move. His eyes remained fixed on the screen as the story continued, showing clips of Elena. His Elena at various business events, in board meetings, closing million-dollar deals. Thompson's net worth estimated at over $3 billion. The wooden spoon slipped from his fingers, clattering against the floor. $3 billion. All those nights he'd stayed up calculating bills, trying to figure out how to save his mother, how to keep his home. All those conversations about dreams and struggles, all those moments of shared vulnerability. The bell above the door chimed. Elena walked in, wearing her usual simple clothes, her face lighting up when she saw him, then falling as she noticed the TV screen. For a moment, they stood frozen, the news anchor's voice filling the devastating silence between them. "Alex," she started, her voice barely a whisper, "I was going to tell you today, How much?" His voice was strange, distant. "How much does the experimental treatment for my mother cost? 100,000? 200,000? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Probably pocket change for you, right?" "Please let me explain." "Explain what?" The heat of betrayal rose in his chest. "How you watched me break apart trying to save my mom. How you played at being just another person learning to make pizza while my whole world was falling apart." Elena stepped forward, reaching for him, but he backed away. The kitchen counter hit his spine. Nowhere else to retreat. It wasn't a game, Alex. None of it was a game. Then what was it? His voice cracked. Some kind of social experiment? Slumming it with the common folk, getting material for your next inspirational leadership book. Tears welled in Elena's eyes. I needed to feel real again, to remember what it was like to just be human. She gestured helplessly at the TV screen, where her corporate self still smiled perfectly. That person up there, she's not me. Not really. Not anymore. And this is... Alex's laugh was bitter. The billionaire playing pizza maker? Tell me, what was your endgame here? Were you ever going to tell me? Or was I just going to be a funny story you told at cocktail parties? I fell in love with you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with truth and tragedy. Alex closed his eyes, remembering every shared smile, every brush of hands, every moment he thought was real. Maybe they had been real. Maybe that made it worse. Love doesn't lie, he said finally, his voice quiet. Love doesn't watch someone suffer when they have the power to help. The news segment ended, switching to weather, but the damage was done. The small, warm world they'd built together lay shattered at their feet. Like a dropped plate, neither knew how to piece back together. Alex, please, I have deliveries to make. He cut her off, grabbing his keys. He couldn't look at her, couldn't bear to see if her tears were as real as his pain. I'm sure you have a company to run anyway. As he pushed past her toward the door, Elena called out one last time, her voice breaking. It was real. All of it. I just wanted to be seen for who I am, not what I own. Alex paused at the door, his back to her. The problem is, he said softly, I don't know who you are at all. The bell chimed as he left, the sound somehow final. Elena stood alone in the kitchen they'd shared, surrounded by the warmth and simplicity she'd grown to love, watching her carefully constructed world of truth and lies collapse like a poorly made dough. Tony found Elena still standing in the kitchen, tears streaming down her face. The old man's eyes held no surprise, only a deep understanding that made everything worse. I've ruined everything, she whispered, clutching her apron. The simple piece of cloth that had become more precious than all her designer clothes. Sit, Tony commanded, pulling out a chair. He moved to the ancient coffee maker, the one Alex always said made better coffee than any fancy machine. Talk to me, Piccolina, from the beginning. Elena's hands wrapped around the warm mug Tony placed before her. I was suffocating in my own life, she began. Every decision, every moment watched and judged. Then I saw this place, saw him. She trailed off, remembering Alex's face when he'd first offered her pizza. And you found something real, Tony finished for her. His weathered hands folded over hers. But real things can't grow in the dark, Elena. I was going to tell him today. The words felt hollow now. I had it all planned. I was going to explain everything, help his mother, show him I could be part of his world and mine. Tony's expression softened. Sometimes we want so badly to hold on to something precious. We forget that trust is more precious still. The morning light streamed through the windows, catching the dust motes in its beam. Soon customers would arrive, expecting their usual orders. But nothing was usual anymore. He'll never forgive me, Elena said, her voice breaking. You didn't. See his face, Tony? The way he looked at me, like I'd taken something from him. You did, Tony replied gently. You took his choice to know who he was really sharing his heart with. The truth of those words hit Elena like a physical blow. In trying to protect this genuine connection, she'd tainted it with lies. Every real moment between them was now colored by what she'd hidden. Her phone buzzed. James, again. The corporate world wouldn't wait forever. But for the first time since she'd walked away from it, that world felt less like an escape and more like a prison of her own making. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted, her voice small. Tony stood, his joints creaking slightly. The question isn't how to fix it, Piccolina. The question is, who are you going to be now that the truth is known? Elena looked down at her, flour-dusted hands, then at her reflection in the darkened window. Two versions of herself stared back, the powerful CEO and the woman who'd found joy in simple things. For the first time, she wondered if they had to be separate people at all. I need to go, she said suddenly, standing. There's something I have to do. Tony nodded, understanding in his eyes. Some things break clean, Elena. Sometimes that's what makes them possible to mend. As she turned to leave, he called after her. And Elena, the dough recipe I taught you, it wasn't just about the ingredients. It was about patience, honesty, and knowing when to let things rise on their own. She paused at the door, managing a weak smile. I'm starting to understand that, Tony. The bell chimed as she left, its sound echoing in the empty shop. Tony looked at the two coffee cups on the table, one half drunk, one untouched, and said a quiet prayer in Italian for the hearts of young people who had to learn life's hardest lessons the hard way. The Tech Guard headquarters lobby felt foreign to Elena as she walked through it, still wearing her pizza shop clothes. Employees stopped mid-conversation, watching their CEO stride past in jeans and a simple sweater. The whispers followed her like ripples in a pond. James met her at the elevator, tablet in hand, relief visible on his face. Thank God you're back. The boards assembled in the main conference room. Richards is making his move. How bad? Elena asked as they stepped into the elevator. They're voting on whether to accept Globetech's hostile takeover bid. Richards has convinced half the board it's the only way to stabilize the company. James hesitated. Elena, they're planning to lay off 30% of the workforce. The elevator numbers ticked upward, each floor bringing her closer to a decision point. Those are people, James. Families. Not numbers on a spreadsheet. Like, your pizza maker? James asked softly. Elena's head snapped toward him. He shrugged apologetically. I had you followed. It's my job to protect you, even from yourself. The elevator opened directly into the executive floor. Through the glass walls of the conference room, Elena could see the board members assembled. Richard, standing at the head of the table, he faltered mid-sentence as she entered. Elena, he recovered smoothly. How kind of you to join us. We were just discussing the dismantling of everything we've built. Elena interrupted, remaining, standing as everyone else sat. The destruction of thousands of families' livelihoods? Richard smiled thinly. We're discussing saving this company from your recent instability. The market doesn't respond well to CEOs who abandon their posts to play at being common workers. The condescension in his voice reminded her of every executive who dismissed her mother years ago. But now, instead of anger, she felt clarity. You know what I learned making pizza, John? She looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes. I learned that every number on our reports is a real person. Every efficiency measure we discuss affects someone's ability to pay their bills, care for their family, hold on to their dreams. She moved to the window, looking out at the city below. Somewhere out there, Alex was making his deliveries, carrying his burden alone. We've lost sight of what this company was meant to be. My mother didn't build TechGuard to be another soulless corporation. She built it to protect people. Noble sentiments, Richard sneered. But sentiment doesn't pay shareholders. Elena turned back, steel in her voice. No, but innovation does. Customer loyalty does. Employee dedication does. She nodded to James, who distributed folders to each board. Remember, inside you'll find my counter-proposal. Instead of layoffs, we're going to reinvest in our people. The board members began flipping through the documents as Elena continued. Our employees' children need medical care. We're building an on-site clinic. They need education. We're establishing a scholarship fund. They have dreams of their own. Businesses? We're creating an incubator program. This is corporate suicide, Richard sputtered. The costs alone will be offset by the 30% pay cut to executive salaries, starting with mine. Eleanor's voice cut through his protest. We've forgotten that our greatest assets walk through those doors every morning, not our stock prices. She could see the tide turning in the room. Even Richards's closest allies were studying the proposal with interest. We have a choice, Elena continued. We can be another company that prioritizes profit over people, or we can remember why we started this journey in the first place. The vote, when it came, was decisive. Richards stormed out, already on his phone to his broker, but Elena barely noticed. Her mind was already on her next task, one that wouldn't be solved with a board. Vote or business plan. James, she called as the room cleared. I need you to set up a meeting with Memorial Hospital's administrative board and find out everything you can about experimental cancer treatments. Her assistant smiled, already typing on his tablet. Already done, but Elena... He paused. Are you sure you can fix everything? Elena thought of Alex's face when he showed her his restaurant plans, of his mother in the hospital, of the simple truth that had gotten lost in all her lies. No, she admitted, but I have to try. Sometimes the biggest things start with the smallest acts of kindness. I just forgot that kindness needs truth to make it real. The hospital corridor seemed longer tonight. Alex walked it slowly, the weight of the day's revelations making each step heavier than the last. His mother's room number glowed softly in the dimmed lights. 412. Inside, the steady beep of monitors. Marked time like a metronome of worry. You look tired, mijo. his mother said as he entered, her voice weaker than yesterday. The experimental treatment they couldn't afford might have helped, but now even the regular treatments were becoming too expensive. The latest bill in his pocket felt like it was burning a hole through his jacket. "I'm fine, Mom." The lie tasted bitter. Nothing was fine. The woman he'd fallen for was a billionaire CEO who'd played at being normal. His home would be gone by the end of the month. And his mother, he couldn't even finish that thought. She patted the bed beside her, and he sat carefully, mindful of the IV lines. "Tell me what's happened with Elena," she said, always able to read him. "You haven't mentioned her in 2 days." Alex stared at his hands, remembered them covered in flour as Elena taught him her newly learned dough-tossing technique. Had even that been real? "She's not who I thought she was." A nurse came in to check vitals, interrupting them. Alex watched. The numbers on the monitors, understanding them too well after months of hospital visits. Each one told a story of decline that medical intervention could reverse, if only they had the means. Once they were alone again, his mother took his hand. "Sometimes people surprise us in ways we don't expect. It doesn't always mean they're not who we thought they were. Sometimes it means they're more." "She lied to me, Mom, every day, every moment." His voice cracked. "She watched me struggle with your bills, with everything, and she could have..." He couldn't finish. And if she had swept in with her money on day one? His mother's question was gentle. Would you have let her see the real you, or would you have seen only her wealth? Alex stood abruptly, pacing the small room. "That's not the point. She should have told me the truth, like you told her about me, about our struggles." The question hit home. He hadn't told Elena the full truth either, had hidden his deepest worries and fears behind a smile and a pizza box. Pride, it seemed, was a two-way street. A commotion in the hallway drew his attention. Through the door's window, he saw doctors. Rushing to another room, heard the urgent calls for assistance. In this place, time was always the enemy, and money was time. His phone buzzed, a text from Tony. She came back to explain. "When you're ready to listen, there's more to the story." Alex switched off the phone. He couldn't deal with Elena right. Now couldn't reconcile the woman who'd laughed with him over failed pizza dough with the powerful CEO he'd seen on TV. The distance between their worlds felt impossible to bridge. "I should have been there more," he said suddenly, the guilt he'd been carrying spilling out. "If I'd worked harder, saved more..." "Stop!" His mother's voice was firm despite its weakness. "You've carried too much alone for too long. Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is accept help when it's offered." "Not like this," Alex insisted. "Not from someone who what? Who cares? Enough to share your life, to learn your dreams." She coughed, and Alex quickly helped her sip water. "Pride is a luxury we cannot afford right now, mijo." The evening nurse appeared with medication, and Alex stepped out to give them privacy. In the hallway, he saw a familiar face, the elderly father of one of his regular delivery customers. The man was crying quietly in a chair, while a doctor spoke in hushed tones. Some burdens, Alex realized, were universal, regardless of bank, accounts, or social status. When he returned to his mother's room, she had drifted to sleep. In the quiet, he pulled out his notebook, the one where he'd drawn his restaurant plans. The pages felt different now, the dreams inside tainted by reality's harsh light. But as he turned to the last page, he found something new. Sketches. In Elena's hand, small additions to his plans, notes about community programs and free meal initiatives. She'd seen his dream and hadn't tried to change it. She'd only imagined ways to help it grow. The truth hit him then, sitting in the sterile hospital room with his mother's labored breathing as background. Sometimes love means swallowing pride before it swallows you. But even knowing that, he wasn't sure if he could bridge the gulf between his world and Elena's, or if she'd even want him to try. The Memorial Hospital boardroom fell silent as Elena finished her proposal. She stood in her CEO power suit, but flour still clung to her shoes, a reminder of who she'd become in the past weeks. "Let me be clear," she stated, her voice firm. TechGuard's new community health initiative isn't just about one patient. We're proposing a complete overhaul of your financial assistance program, starting with full funding for all experimental cancer treatments for the next 5 years. The hospital administrators exchanged glances. The amount of money she'd just offered would transform their entire oncology department. "And in return," the head administrator asked cautiously, "in return, you treat people like people, not numbers." Starting with Maria Martinez in room 412. Across town, Alex sat in Tony's office, staring at an envelope he'd found in his locker. Inside was a hospital letter he'd never seen before, detailing his mother's acceptance into an experimental treatment program. All expenses paid through an anonymous charitable foundation. The door opened behind him. "She didn't do it for you," Tony said quietly, settling into his chair. "She did it because it was right." "How long have you known?" Alex asked, his voice rough, "about who she really was?" "Since her second day here." Tony's weathered face creased in a smile. "You don't survive 40 years in New York without learning to spot the difference between designer jeans and regular ones." Alex fingered the hospital letter. "I don't understand. Why would someone like her choose to spend her days making pizza? Learn to love the simple things?" Tony leaned forward. "Maybe for the same reason you spend your free time drawing restaurant plans instead of bitter. Some people want more than what life handed them. Up or down?" The afternoon sun slanted through the small office window, catching the dust motes. In its beam, somewhere in the kitchen, Marco was singing off-key while prepping marinara sauce. "She came by earlier," Tony continued. "Paid 6 months advance rent on your apartment. Told your landlord if he breathed a word of it to you, she'd buy the building and turn it into a pizza school." Despite everything, Alex felt a laugh bubble up. It sounded exactly like something Elena would do. His phone buzzed. A message from the hospital. His mother was responding well to the new treatment. The doctors were optimistic. The miracle he'd prayed for had come, but not in the way he'd expected. "I don't know how to accept this," he admitted. "Maybe," Tony said gently, "it's not about accepting or not accepting. Maybe it's about understanding that love doesn't keep score." Alex stood, moving to the small window. Below, he could see the spot where he'd first shared pizza with Elena. Everything had seemed simpler then, yet nothing had been what it appeared. "She's still there, you know," Tony added. "Same person who learned to make pizza dough, who laughed at your terrible jokes, who saw your dreams and didn't try to change them, just wanted to help them grow." The truth of those words hit him. Elena hadn't tried to buy his restaurant dream or take it over. She'd simply added notes in the margins, little suggestions for making it more what it already was. "I have deliveries," Alex said finally, but his hand lingered on the hospital letter. Tony nodded, understanding. Sometimes the hardest distance to cross is the one between our pride and our heart. As Alex headed to his car, he looked up at the building's rooftop garden where they'd grown. Tony's herbs! Elena had helped plant new basil last week, her corporate manicure ruined by the soil, laughing as she'd gotten dirt on her nose. In that moment, he made his decision. Some bridges needed to be built from both sides. He just hoped he wasn't too late to start building his. The rooftop garden of Tony's Pizza was different at sunset. Alex stood among the herb planters, remembering all the evenings he'd spent here dreaming of his own restaurant. Now, those dreams felt both closer and more complicated than ever. "I thought I'd find you up here," Elena's voice came from behind him. She wasn't wearing either of her usual outfits, no power suit, no pizza shop casual. Instead, she wore simple business attire, a middle ground between her two worlds. Alex turned, seeing her silhouetted against the setting sun. "Tony told you?" He didn't have to. "This was always your thinking spot." She moved to stand beside him, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "The basil we planted is growing well." The mundane observation hung between them, heavy with unspoken meanings. Finally, Alex broke the silence. "Thank you for my mother." for not telling me it was you. I didn't do it to earn your forgiveness, Elena said quietly. Some things are just right, regardless of... She gestured vaguely between them. Alex nodded, running his fingers over a basil leaf. Its fragrance filled the air, reminding him of shared lessons and laughter. I've been thinking about what's real and what isn't, about trust and lies and... He paused. About how I didn't tell you the whole truth either. We were both afraid, Elena acknowledged. Me of losing something genuine, you of appearing weak. She reached into her bag, pulling out a folder. But I'm not afraid anymore, and I'm hoping you won't be either. She held out the folder. Alex took it hesitantly, opening it to find architectural drawings. His eyes widened as he recognized his own design sketches, professionally rendered. These are my plans, he said. But different, enhanced, Elena corrected gently. Not changed. Look closer. As Alex flipped through the pages, he saw how his original vision had been expanded. The community table he'd dreamed of was now an entire section. His idea for helping those who couldn't afford meals had become a fully developed program. Even his mother's recipes had their own special menu section. I don't understand, he said, though part of him was beginning to. Elena stepped closer, pointing to specific details in the plans. Your dream, Alex, every bit of it, just with the resources to help more people, to do more good. She took a deep breath. I'm not offering to buy your dream. I'm asking to be part of it. As what? Alex asked, his voice rough with emotion. My silent partner? My corporate sponsor? As someone who loves both making pizza and making a difference. Elena's voice was soft but firm. The Elena who learned to make dough in this kitchen isn't separate from the CEO who runs TechGuard. They're both me, just like the delivery driver, who dreams of his own restaurant isn't separate from the man who'd give his last dollar to help someone in need. She turned to face him fully. I'm proposing a chain of community-focused restaurants, starting with this one. Your design, your vision, your leadership, but with the resources to make it everything you dreamed of and more. Every location would have that same spirit you created here. Good food, real connections, helping those in need. Alex stared at the plans, seeing his dream reflected back at him, bigger yet somehow still intimately his. And us? He asked quietly. Where do we fit in all this? Elena's hand found his, flower-free but still familiar. That depends on whether you can accept all of me, just as I accept all of you. No more masks, no more hiding, just us, building something real together. The sun had almost set now, painting the city in shades of gold and purple. Below they could hear the sounds of Tony's Pizza, customers laughing, Marco singing, the eternal rhythm of a place that had brought them together. Alex looked at their joined hands, then at the plans, then at Elena's face, seeing for the first time how all the versions of her came together into one complete person. Just as he was both the dreaming delivery driver and the determined son, the ambitious businessman and the compassionate soul. The choice he faced wasn't really about business at all. It was about whether love could bridge the gap between worlds, whether trust could be rebuilt stronger than before, whether two people could meet in the middle without losing themselves. The herbs around them released their fragrance in the cooling evening air, reminding him of all the real moments they'd shared, all the genuine connections they'd made. Sometimes he realized the biggest dreams come true in ways we never expect. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Tony's Pizza one last time before the renovation would begin. Alex stood in the middle of the empty dining room, his hand resting on a worn table that had served countless customers over the years. Having second thoughts? Elena asked, appearing beside him. She was dressed in work clothes, ready for the day ahead of packing and planning. No, Alex said, surprising himself with how true it felt. Just remembering, he turned to her with a smile. This is where you first sat when you came in that night. Tony bustled in through the front door, carrying a box of fresh pastries and his ever-present coffee. Enough remembering. Today we look forward. He set the box down and pulled out the new sign designs. "Though I still say the logo needs more Italian flair." Elena laughed, the sound echoing in the empty space. "Tony, you're staying on his head." "Chef, you can add all the Italian flair you want to the food." The old man pretended to grumble, but his eyes shone with pride. The deal they'd struck was perfect. He would train the staff for all new locations, ensuring his legacy lived on, while finally having time to spend with his grandchildren. "Mom's coming home next week," Alex said quietly to Elena as Tony busied himself with the pastries. "The doctors say the treatment is working better than they hoped." Elena squeezed his hand, just in time to help us plan the menu. She hesitated. "Are you sure you're okay with using her recipes? They're your family heritage." "That's exactly why they belong here," Alex said firmly. "This place is about family. Always has been." He looked at her meaningfully. "Always will be." Through the window, they could see the construction crews arriving, ready to begin transforming the old pizza shop into something new while preserving its heart. Just like them, Alex thought, changing and growing without losing what made them real in the first place. James, Elena's assistant, entered with a stack of permits and papers. "Everything's approved," he announced. "We can begin whenever you're ready." Alex took one last look around the space where his dream had begun, then turned to Elena with a nod. "We're ready." The new sign glowed warmly in the evening light. Martinez and Thompson's community kitchen. Inside, the renovated space hummed with life and laughter. Modern fixtures blended seamlessly with recovered pieces from the old Tony's Pizza, creating an atmosphere that was both fresh and familiar. Alex's mother sat at the special family table, her color returned and her smile bright as she watched her recipes being served to a full house. Between courses, she would catch Alex's eye and give him a knowing wink. Her son, the restaurateur, just as she'd always dreamed. Elena moved through the crowd with practiced ease, no longer hiding who she was, but simply being herself. The CEO who loved making pizza. The businesswoman who believed in community. She stopped at each table, making sure the pay-what-you-can policy was working smoothly, ensuring every guest felt welcomed regardless of their means. Tony held court in the open kitchen, training the first batch of culinary students from their newly established program. His marinara sauce still simmered in the same old pot, but now it would help teach a new generation about the power of good food and open hearts. The dream had grown beyond either of them, becoming something neither could have created alone. And in that growth, they had found not just success, but something far more valuable. They had found their true selves in each other. 1 year later, Alex stood at the window of Martinez and Thompson's community kitchen, watching the first snow of winter dust the sidewalk. The restaurant had become everything they dreamed and more, a place where good food and kindness went hand in hand. 5 more locations had opened across the city, each carrying the same spirit of community and care. Through the falling snow, he noticed a figure sitting on the bench outside, the same bench where he'd first found Elena, a young woman in worn clothes, clutching a job rejection letter and looking lost. Elena appeared beside him, following his gaze. Without a word, they moved together toward the kitchen. As they prepared a fresh pizza, the same margarita recipe from that first shared meal, they exchanged knowing smiles. Some stories, after all, come full circle, and sometimes the simplest acts of kindness can change everything.